Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. I welcome you all to the Hindu newspaper analysis for today. Before we begin, a couple of important announcements. As you know, we are now back with the Big News Initiative, a video that goes online at 2 p.m. every single day on our YouTube channel, where we discuss in detail some of the most important topics that have remained in the news. So we take up the most significant, the most important topic from the UPSC point of view that has remained in the news that particular day and discuss that in detail every single day at 2 p.m. Don't forget to join us for that as well. Also, this Sunday, that is 23rd of October, 11 a.m., there's a golden opportunity for all of you to get up to 90% scholarship on the Byjus IAS UPSC preparation courses. You can get this scholarship by excelling in the BYJU'S National Scholarship Test. You can register for free. The link to register is given in the description of the video. You can register till 6 a.m. on 23rd of October. Don't forget to register to check how your preparation is and where do you stand as compared to the other people. You will get an all India rank and your score analysis as well. Now let's begin with the first article that is written by three people coming together related to the UN specifically. We have India head of the UN Environment Program, we have the UN Resident Coordinator in India, and we have the UN Development Program representative. These three people are touching upon the same view. They are saying that right now India can actually become a world leader and lead the world when it comes to action against climate change. The reason why this article is written is that the UN Secretary General is in India and he, along with the Prime Minister of the country, will launch the Vision of Life. The life vision that will take forward the fight against climate change. Now, in very simple terms, let me first explain to you what is a life mission. Last year in November 2021, Indian Prime Minister, while speaking at the COP26, talked about lifestyle for environment, also known as LIFE life. He meant to say that in order to fight against climate change, rather than thinking of big attempts to actually bring in great initiatives at a huge cost, we should also focus on making changes in our day-to-day lifestyle. Prime Minister Modi had said that even if small actions are undertaken throughout the entire world, even on an individual scale, can bring in humongous changes. For example, actions such as saving energy at home, cycling and using public transportation instead of driving, eating more plant based food, wasting less food. These are some of the things which can be done at an individual level itself and do not really require any intervention from the government side. It does not even require spending billions and trillions of dollars. This initiative, which was first announced by the Prime Minister of India in November 2021, this will now be launched as a worldwide global movement now starting from Gujarat. That is why the UN Secretary General is in India. The authors here are saying that despite the multiple climate change summits and the countries making aim of not letting the temperature of the earth increase by over 1.5 degrees Celsius, the fact remains that none of the efforts taken by the countries around the world have been successful in curtailing the impact of climate change. We have seen how the extreme climatic conditions are now becoming extremely frequent. We have seen floods, cyclones, we have seen droughts, we have seen all these kind of extreme weather situations across the entire world. This is why it is time to now go ahead and have a new initiative in the form of the life, that is lifestyle for environment. The authors here are saying that the UN Environment Program has suggested nudging the people towards these kind of initiatives, nudging the people towards discouraging food waste by suggesting the cafeterias to serve in smaller plates, also encouraging recycling as much as possible, creating dedicated path for cycling, etc. And all this is important because as per UNEP, two-thirds of the global greenhouse gas emission can be attributed just to the household consumption and lifestyle. That is why it is so important. Now, where does India come in all this? As we discussed earlier, India is in a very unique position right now. India is widely regarded as a leader of the developing world. We are the ones who usually put forward the view of the developing nations whenever it comes to international forums, be it at the Climate Change Summit, be it at WTO, etc. That is why in this initiative as well, India is being seen as a country which can actually take this motto forward. As we discussed, the UN Secretary General is in India and along with the Prime Minister of the country, he will inaugurate the Vision of Life, urging the consumers across the world to bring in changes into their lifestyle by 2027. We also have to understand that while we talk about bringing changes to our lifestyle, we also have to understand that the responsibility is actually differential, meaning that the developed nations must take the lead because they are the ones who have contributed the most towards climate change. We all know that the poorest nations, where consumption is the lowest, they are the ones, unfortunately, who are actually bearing the burden of climate change. While the developed nations are the ones, because of industrialization, because of pollution, they are the ones who have contributed the most to climate change. On the other hand, because of their money power, they have been able to sustain and fight off any climatic change that has happened in their country. Thus, we must understand that the fight between the developed and the developing nations still continues, and the developed nations must understand that they have much bigger carbon footprint and they have more responsibility of saving the world. Any person living in the least developed country is not responsible for the climate change and thus should not face the consequences of the climate change that is happening. In the words of Mahatma Gandhi, as he famously said, the world has enough for everyone's needs but not for everyone's greed. This is what the nations across the world must understand. India is also in a unique position because India, as you know, will hold the presidency of the G20 in the coming months, and thus India has an opportunity to set such kind of an agenda to be followed throughout the entire world. Now, in the past few years, we have seen a lot of initiatives taken from the side of the government of India to fight against climate change. For example, it was recently announced that Indian railways will be net zero by 2030. Prime Minister had announced that the Indian railway system has set a target of making itself net zero. More passengers and the entire population of the world travel by Indian railways every single year. Thus, making it net zero will play a major role in achieving our climate change goals. Not just this, the Prime Minister, as you know, had also recently given the Panch Amrit, that is, the five initiatives that the government of India is trying to achieve in the coming years to do our bit in the fight against climate change. That is, bringing non fossil fuel capacity to 500 gigawatts by 2030, fulfilling half of our energy requirement by renewable, cutting down carbon emissions, bringing down the carbon intensity, and also achieving net zero by 2070. All these can be very well quoted in your answers while you're writing answers about the climate change initiative taken by the Indian government. At the world stage, the Paris Climate Agreement, as you know, is remembered time and time again because the nations in this climate change had made goals for themselves to ensure that they actually remain below the 2 degrees Celsius mark. Also, they said that we will try to limit the rise of temperature by 1.5 degrees Celsius, but that does not really seem to be happening. Although a lot of promises were made at the Paris Climate Agreement, but as you know, these are not binding, and that is why most of the nations are nowhere near the aims that they had set themselves at the Paris Climate Change Summit. The next article that we have here is about the next Chief Justice of India, Justice D.Y. Chandrachud. The article says that if you look at the tenure of the next Chief Justice of India, this will be the largest tenure of a Chief Justice of India in the last decade or so. As you know, Justice D.Y. Chandrachud will take oath as the 50th Chief Justice of India on November 9, 2022, after the current Chief Justice of India, Justice U. Lalit, retires. Now, a very interesting point here is that D.Y. Chandrachud's father, Justice Y.V. Chandrachud, holds the record for being the longest serving Chief Justice of India in the country. Also, when he takes up the position, D.Y. Chandrachud and his father will be the only father-son duo to both hold the position of the Chief Justice of India, which is in itself a very incredible achievement. Now, his father, that is Justice V.Y. Chandrachud, was actually at the post of the Chief Justice of India for 7 years, 4 months and 19 days. Now, as you know from Indian polity, the Supreme Court judges or the Chief Justice of India do not have any fixed tenure. What they have is the retirement age, which is 65 years. So, whenever they reach the age of 65, they retire. The current Chief Justice, that is Justice U. Lalit, only has a tenure of 73 days, after which he will turn 65 and he would retire. That is why it has already been decided that the next Chief Justice of India will be Justice D.Y. Chandrachud. If you look at those Chief Justices that have served for the shortest tenure, there is Justice K.N. Singh, who was the Chief Justice of India for only 17 days. If you look at the state-wise distribution, the states which have contributed the largest number of Chief Justices, it is Maharashtra with 7 Chief Justices, including Justice D.Y. Chandrachud. Then we have UP, we have Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh, etc. There is one more interesting part. Because Justice D.Y. Chandrachud will have such a long tenure, that is about 2 years, a lot of judges which are next in line will actually retire before his retirement. Meaning that after Justice D.Y. Chandrachud retires in 2024, the next in line will be Justice Sanjeev Khanna. The interesting part is if you look at the current seniority of the judges in the Supreme Court, Justice Sanjeev Khanna is actually at the 10th place. So he is currently the 10th senior most judge in the Supreme Court, but he will be the one who will actually become the next Chief Justice after Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, because the others will retire because of the long tenure. So whenever we have any Chief Justice of India with the longer tenure as compared to usual, it actually takes away the chance of many next judges to become the Chief Justice of India. As you can see here, the list of those Chief Justices of India who have served for the longest tenure: Justice B.Y. Chandrachud, that is the person who holds the rank first, over 7 years. Then we have Justice Bhuvneshwar Prasad Sinha, Justice A.N. Ray. I'm sure you would have heard about Justice A.N. Ray when you talk about the emergency era, when you talk about Indira Gandhi being the Prime Minister and wanting her choice to become the Chief Justice of India. Then you look at those justices who have served the shortest tenure as the Chief Justice of India: Justice K.N. Singh, Justice S. Rajendra Babu, Justice J.C. Shah, and even the present Chief Justice of India, Justice U.U. Lalit, is there at the 5th position. Now, these are the people who are next in line, if all goes to plan, to become the Chief Justices of India. In the entire list, I want you to pay attention on the last name, that is Justice B.V. Nagaratna. If all goes to plan, Justice B.V. Nagaratna is scheduled to become the first female Chief Justice of India in India's history. As you know, so far we have not had any female Chief Justice in the Supreme Court. She, if all goes to plan, in 2027 will become the first female Chief Justice of India. So we'll have to see if that also turns out according to the plan. Now, the Chief Justice of India, as you know, has a lot of powers. However, the one most important power that has been in the news time and time again in the past few months is the power of the Chief Justice of India to be the master of the roster. Now, what exactly is the master of the roster? See, Supreme Court of India hears multiple cases at any point of time. There are different courtrooms where multiple cases are going on simultaneously. Now, who decides which judge will preside over which case? Also, who decides what will be the strength of the bench? Whether a particular case will be heard by 2 judges, 3 judges, 5, 7, 9, 13, so on and so forth. All that is dependent on the roster, and that is decided by the Chief Justice of India. The Chief Justice of India is the administrative head of the Supreme Court, and as that head, he has a prerogative to allocate cases to particular benches. He decides which judge will hear which case. This gives the Chief Justice of India immense power. That is, just by choosing which particular judge will preside over which case, he can actually have a great impact on the outcome of the case. This has been a matter of debate in the past few years, ever since we had the case of Justice Deepak Mishra. When he was the Chief Justice of India, there was some controversy, a case where his name was also involved indirectly. There was a controversy about how can he decide which judge will hear the case. But since then, it has been told again and again by the Supreme Court that it is the Chief Justice of India who is the real master of the roster. The next article that we have here is an unfortunate news for India. That is, China again has placed on hold India's attempt to designate Lashkar-e-Taiba commander Shahid Mahmood as a global terrorist under the UNSC 1267 list. Now, this is not the first time that such a thing has happened. China has actually made a habit out of it. Whenever India or US propose a name of a person to be designated as a global terrorist, China usually puts that name on hold with a lot of different reasons. Many times they say that we don't have enough evidence. Many times they say that we are still thinking about it, and they put these decisions on hold for a long, long time. This has happened once again. As you know, the UNSC 1267 list is a list of those terrorists which are specifically affiliated to Al Qaeda or ISIS. This is the fourth time in the last 4 months itself that China has blocked a listing move by India or the US. Now, the rules of how to list a person as a global terrorist is very, very simple. It says that any member of the Security Council, that is permanent or non-permanent member. As you know, India is a non-permanent member in the UNSC right now. So any member of the UNSC can propose a name to be included in this list. Now the other members have an option to either accept that or put that on hold. Whenever a nation actually puts an objection like China has done, usually 6 months are given to solve those pending objections. For example, if China says that we think that we don't have enough evidence, then the country that has actually suggested the name, let's say India, India will have the responsibility of submitting more evidence to convince China. Usually 6 month period is allowed to resolve this issue, but this can be extended as well. However, the reality is whenever a nation actually puts some name on hold, it is accepted that now this name will not go ahead. This is what usually has been the case. However, there have been some exceptions, but usually whenever a name is put on hold, you cannot expect the same name to go forward. Now, let me give you some examples of what has happened in the past. Since 2001, China has been trying to block the names of these people who have been based in Pakistan to go on this global list of terrorists. The most famous example was of the founder of Jaish-e-Mohammed, that is Masood Azhar. As you know, Masood Azhar was actually released by the government of India in 1999 and given over to the terrorists in return for the hostages in the plane that was hijacked, that is the Indian Airlines flight IC-814 that was landed in Kandahar. It took off from Kathmandu, it had to land in India, but it was taken by the hijackers to Kandahar. This is where they had demanded releasing of certain people from the prison, and the Indian government released them, including Masood Azhar. Since then, the government of India has been trying to designate Masood Azhar as a global terrorist. China kept on placing this on hold time and time again, but finally, after the Pulwama attacks were traced back to Jaish-e-Mohammed, China finally withdrew its hold. This is one of the very rare occasions when China has actually withdrawn its hold from any person as being named as a global terrorist. Now, what other options does India have? Now, in reality, the Indian government cannot go ahead in this particular committee unless China removes its hold. But that is why the Indian government looks for some other alternatives, that is, some other international forums where some action can be taken. For example, the government of India has been trying to persuade the FATF to put Pakistan on the grey list, because of which Pakistan actually has been in the grey list for a long time. This is because we say that Pakistan has been responsible for global funding of terror. So while we have China who is blocking the listing of terrorists in the UNSC, we are trying to explore other avenues as well. Now, the article is based on the UNSC 1267 committee. Although we have discussed this in the past as well, let's try and look at what this committee is. As I said earlier, this committee comprises of all permanent and the non-permanent members of UNSC. It was first set up in 1999, but it was mainly made much more powerful after the World Trade Center attack in 2001. It is mainly to blacklist those terrorists who are associated with Al Qaeda or ISIS. This list, if you look at the people who are in this list, it is full of Pakistani national and residents. Anyone who becomes a part of this list faces a lot of travel bans, faces freezing of assets, arms embargo, etc. The process for listing, as I discussed, is simple. Any member state can submit a proposal for listing a group, individual, or any other entity. The proposal is then sent to all the members. If no objections are raised within 5 working days, then the listing is automatically approved. However, technical hold can be put by members, which is the case in case of China. Usually, the hold has to be resolved within 6 months, but it can be extended also on a case-to-case basis. The next article that we have here is the center government's announcement to promote more destinations in Swadesh Darshan Part 2 scheme. The government has identified cities in 15 states across the country to promote as a part of India's new domestic tourism policy. These also include Prayagraj, Chitrakoot, and Gwalior. As you know, Swadesh Darshan scheme, when it was first introduced, was actually theme-based tourist circuit, like the Buddhism circuit, Ramayan circuit, Ambedkar circuit, etc. Now we have moved away from those theme-based circuits, and now we are also promoting specific cities across the country. This is the second phase of the Swadesh Darshan scheme. This phase also includes Khajuraho, Ajanta Ellora, etc. As you know, India has a lot of these cities which have a lot of things to offer to the tourists, not just international tourists but domestic tourists as well. This is a 100% centrally funded scheme and has been designed to be in line for promoting local tourism specifically. It was first launched in 2014-15 by the Ministry of Tourism, which also provides financial assistance to the state governments. Now, as you know, tourism sector was extremely hard hit by COVID-19 pandemic. No one was traveling anywhere across the world or in the country, and that is why anyone associated with the tourism sector, be it hotels, be it drivers, be it tourist guides, etc., all of them were extremely negatively impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. The tourism sector, directly or indirectly, accounts for close to 15% of employment in the entire country. And that is why the government of India, having realized this, is actually giving huge push to tourism. The Indian government in the past few years has also included the facility of e-visa and visa on arrival to a lot of nations across the world to ensure that people coming in from outside the country are able to get to India very, very easily. As you can see, tourism and travel contribute a huge amount of money to India's GDP. Although we see a major dip in 2020 because of the pandemic, we are forecasting a huge increase by the year 2029. One of the things that the government of India is doing in this regard is also to build better infrastructure. For example, if a tourist comes in from outside the country or within the country also, they should have good facilities to actually visit. There should be sanitized places, there should be public washrooms, good places to stay. There should be tourist guides who are able to speak multiple languages. They should be hospitable. All these things are taken into consideration. The government of India, that is why, is also setting up many more airports to boost the connectivity to all these places. There are a lot of different types of tourisms that the government of India is focusing on. Rural tourism, giving a slice of the real rural life to people within the country and outside. Pilgrimage tourism, as you know, the government of India has ensured that tourism hubs actually are developed nearby the famous pilgrimage places across the country. Luxury tourism, as the name suggests, is for those people who are not really afraid of spending a lot of money. They want the best possible experience forward. Then we have medical tourism, for which again India has become a hub, especially South India, specifically Chennai. Heritage tourism, as you know, India has a vast history and has a lot of very, very significant monuments that have become a tourist hub. All of these are now focus of the government of India. The next article that we have here is again Prime Minister's speech at the recent Defence Expo 2022 in Gujarat's capital Gandhinagar. The Prime Minister of the country, while speaking at the Defence Expo, launched Mission Def Space. He released a fourth defence indigenization list in this ongoing expo. Now, defence indigenization list is a list of those weapons or equipments which the Indian Defence Forces will not buy from outside the country. This is a list of those weapons or equipments that will compulsorily be bought from Indian manufacturers within the country itself. This is the fourth such list that has come out. Three such lists have already come out earlier as well. The government of India has also opened up multiple challenges. That is, the government of India has given problem statements to the private companies who are working in the field of defense. For example, they have said that our armed forces require these kind of defense equipments, these kind of weapons. Now it is up to you to provide them the proper solution. The Prime Minister also said that in the field of space technology, India has been making multiple strides. For example, more than 60 developing nations are sharing India's space science. The ASEAN nations also will get real-time access to India's satellite data. Not just this, even developed nations in Europe and in America are using our satellite data. As you know, ISRO is involved in commercial launches of satellites from across the world, even from developed nations as well. That is why the Prime Minister is saying that the defense and space sector is something which will bring prosperity in India in the coming years. Now, the positive indigenization list, that is the fourth version that has been released now. This list has been released earlier also three times. Earlier in 2022, it was in April that the third list was actually published. The first list came up in August 2020, the second list was in June 2021, third in April 2022, and the fourth has come up now. The third list that was released in 2022 has complex systems such as sensors, weapons, ammunitions, lightweight tanks, etc. All these will not be bought from outside the country. All these will now be bought from within the country, and this is as per a specific timeline. Please remember, just because the Prime Minister has announced a fourth list doesn't mean that from today onwards these things are banned to be bought from outside. That is not the case. These all have a timeline. That is by 2027, for example. After that, we'll not buy anything from outside, or 2030, 2025. So it all depends on different timelines that have been released by the Government of India. As you can see, the Government of India at the time of releasing the third positive list had actually put out this infographic to show to the entire world that we are trying to reduce our dependence on foreign weapons. Now, having said that, the Government of India has been trying to improve defense indigenization, but there are still a lot of issues that remain. For example, although the private sector has come up considerably in the past few years, we are still mainly dependent on government only for making of these weapons. Companies such as the ordnance factories, HAL, BEL, and BDL are the ones that are the main arms producers in the country. That is why we have seen multiple policy delays, which has led to increasing cost. The weapons that are made in India are not the most advanced technologies in the entire world. While the entire world is working on the fifth generation fighter jets, we are still working on fourth and four and a half generation. There's a long gestation period, as we have seen in case of Tejas also, or INS Vikrant. The date of completion of the project, for example, is never actually abided by. We see a lot of delays and postponement. This is also because there are multiple ministries that look into this. We have the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Industrial Promotion. All of these have control over various parts of the defense production line. Quality issue also remains, which has also stopped India from exporting many more weapons. India has not had a very vast history of research and development, which requires a lot of money from the side of the government. And because of the lack of money, we also don't have enough skills at par with the developed nations around the world. These are the main articles we want to discuss on the Hindu newspaper today. Now, a couple of practice questions. Number one, just releasing positive indigenization list won't have the desired impact unless concrete changes are introduced on the ground in the defense manufacturing sector. Second, critically analyze the role that India can play in leading the world towards achieving its goal of cutting down the impact of climate change. Both these questions have to be answered within 250 words each. Thank you so much for watching the video. Have a good day ahead.